everyone. Welcome. This is a little bit of a different webinar, I'd say. We are not very formal. We're trying to keep this casual. We're going to have a nice conversation, talk about some interesting stuff in regards to Zendesk. We have with us Jake Samson, who will introduce himself shortly, and I'll just start quickly. I'll just say I'm Dan. I've been with Salto for the last 3 years. I lead the customer engineering in EMEA, and I do pre-sales, post-sales support, and I work on a bunch of adapters, and this being one of them. So that's me. Nice to meet you. And Jake, yeah, go ahead.
Hi everyone, my name is Jake Samson. I'm from London, England, and I'm a kind of freelance operations consultant specializing in Zendesk, really. Which I feel like you can never really find a title for a Zendesk admin because Zendesk admin never feels like enough. I guess a Zendesk
Consult
extraordinaire.
architect. There's
Zendesk
all
architect, just
that kind of thing.
somebody who tries to make customer operations run smoother and more efficiently.
Nice. Okay. And quick disclaimer, me and Jake have known each other for a while now, more than a few years. We met
Yes.
in London. But I'm based in Tel Aviv. But let's enough with the nitty-gritty. Let's get to business. So I'm gonna start with a quick screen share. By the way, if you have any questions, you want to say something, feel free to chime in. We can see the chat. This is kind of a discussion between everyone. So don't be shy. Um, so let me quickly share my screen and we can start running through our deck. And again, as I said, it's more of a casual conversation. We're not going to read off the deck and explain every little bullet. It's more about the concept and kind of giving you an idea of what we think about this topic, which is the hidden costs of configuration chaos. So what do we mean when we say that? So basically, we're talking about, just like the sentence says, how untracked changes, downtime, and inefficiencies impact your Zendesk operations and CSAT. Now, it's a mouthful, and there's all kinds of different angles which you can take when talking about these topics, but we are looking at this from a lens of, as Jake mentioned, a consultant, an administrator, an architect, somebody who's highly engaged with setting up the Zendesk instance for the end customers and how all of these things would impact their day-to-day. Right, Jake? Am I doing justice?
Absolutely. I think that really sums it up. It's sometimes when you're using Zendesk, when you're configuring it from the admin point of view, you just feel like you need a personal assistant who can manage everything, who can see everything, have access to everything, and really kind of give you hints and tips and tricks and visibility to everything that's going on within your configuration and within your environment. And I guess that's where Salto enters because that is you become the personal assistant. It's really a, a life-changing tool, shall we say.
Wow. Okay. Um, Interesting, but I think we'll get to kind of the benefits of Salto later. I think for now, what I'm trying to focus on is more about the actual um, maybe disadvantages or things that maybe you don't know that you have. I feel like there's a lot of and no offense here to the Zendesk people, but there is a lot of maturity when it comes to these things, right? So a lot of business applications are in a certain point in time in their maturity. And maybe things that are today more trivial to Zendesk admins were not the case a couple of years ago, right? So um, and maybe for example, and I'm going to say the very, I'm going to mention the very rude competitor, Salesforce, for example. Those folks, and I love the reaction. Those folks, they've been doing these things for a while now. Why? Because that's kind of the industry standard. So I think um, every business application or IT application in general in the SaaS industry has a different maturity which kind of influences the point of view of those administrators and people behind the scenes that are, working on the configuration. And I think Zendesk specifically is now at a turning point. I feel like last few years have been really substantial with all the booming of AI and all the tools that are out there, and there's so many add-ons, and there's a marketplace, and it's like exploding, right? And there's messaging, and um, people expect to get more faster, and they want to talk to a machine that knows what it's saying. So all of these things combined make it more challenging for the administrator to kind of manage these things effectively. And we'll dive into the details. So I think this is a good leeway to kind of move on to the next slide. So yeah, so we're going to talk about an example to kind of set the stage. What does it actually mean that, when an admin goes out, and I'm sure you've all seen this before, where you just go ahead and make a change to a trigger and you're not telling anyone because maybe you just don't know better, honestly, right? Jake, am I doing justice to
I mean,
saying?
totally. As in, I've been the admin tweaking the trigger and not telling people, and I've also been the kind of the manager who's involved in what happens when somebody else does this, and then the chain event of what happens. And it's just, you know what? Sometimes you just need to make a hot fix. Like sometimes somebody has messaged you, someone quite high up, and has said, "Hey Jake, we need you to just quickly tweak this because we want to, I don't know, alter the word." Uh, Fix to be fixes or something like that, or we need to change a tag to say 2025 instead of 2024. Like you come in and you do make these changes without thinking sometimes. But that can have repercussions and things can break and things can break really quickly.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I mean, this goes back to what I said earlier about the maturity piece, where, if this was code, right? If this was your actual source code, nobody would go into production and make a minor change. But because this is a business application that's used maybe for the customer experience side of things, and the people that are working on it are doing this through a UI, and they're not using it, and they're not using, a traditional release management process, then they have the liberty of just doing it, right? And the consequences are the same, which is the part you have to think about, right? So nobody in the right mind would, make a change in code in production on the actual system that, the company you're working for is selling. But people feel fine with, changing a trigger in production. That would mean that eventually there is no service for our customers for the next hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, depending on how long it takes you to, rectify the issue,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, also I guess it comes down to the interface as well. You're not looking at lines and lines and lines of code. You're looking at a really pretty, simple to use uh, front end system
Yeah.
that you kind of Zendesk can entice you into making these changes because you think, oh, this is easy. You just quickly go in and change it. It's not the repercussions aren't as obvious, and there's nothing there because it feels so easy and it looks so easy, and sometimes it can be easy. It feels like you can just do it and you can take on the world, but
Yeah.
like sometimes you can't.
Yeah, fair enough. And I mean, and there are occasions where you would meet, a certain person that would tell you, hey, I never had a problem. Okay, that's fair. You never had a problem until you had a problem, right? And once you did, it could have, catastrophic implications, right? On the business, on the time that you're, putting into something that you could have avoided. Uh, yeah, so this is more of I'd call it a mental exercise, just to think about these things for a second. What are the implications? How am I doing these things in my Zendesk instance? Am I okay? Am I not okay? Do I know the implications? Have I ever thought about them? It's just to kind of give you an idea of
Self-reflection.
exactly, exactly. Thank you, Jake.
Hands up if you've ever been in that situation. That's how I always like to do these webinars. I always, or I guess in person. What's it called when it's in person? A seminar?
Well, you're
So
asking the wrong guy.
yeah, whatever it is, I always kind of say hands up if you've ever accidentally broken something on your Zendesk environment, and the majority of people will end up raising their hands. From the most experienced Zendesk admin to the someone who's just been given access today, it happens. Easy to do.
Yeah, yeah, no, 100%. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. I think we are conscious. Yeah, so what's the dilemma, right? Um, so if you really think about it for a second, what is expected from a Zendesk admin? Make sure things are running, right? Although it sounds very simple, that's the bottom line, right? Make sure that, customers are getting service, chat is working, messaging is working, all, communication lines are working, that the routing is done correctly, that the experience is working as expected. That's basically the expectation, right? But maybe that's not enough, right? So the fact that there is no built-in version control, the fact that, changes happen fast, often undocumented, direct in production, mistakes lead to firefighting, wasted hours, what we just talked about, and growth makes it harder to maintain stability, right? So let's kind of focus on each of these. And maybe, Jake, if you can kind of give us a little bit of a teaser or an example of each one, that would be great.
Yeah. So I mean, it's if you're looking at let's say maybe the firefighting is probably one of my favorite ones, or the wasted hours that come with it, is by spending time putting out the fires of, say, a broken trigger or a broken automation, because there is no way to monitor these changes or kind of predict the impact of these changes. You're taking away of what can be a really beautiful side of Zendesk administration, which is being really customer focused and trying to improve the customer experience for your brand, for your company. Because if you're focusing all your time on the negatives of fixing things, of uh, trying to make things, instead of trying to make things better, but just trying to fix instead, it's not going to drive up those the CSAT scores, drive up reviews, feedback from customers, kind of all these things that you can be gathering or be using to improve your business or improve your customer experience. There's no time to do that because you're spending time doing, I don't want to call it the boring admin stuff, but sometimes it can be the boring admin stuff. It's like, okay, why is this trigger not working? Let me tweak this, let me tweak that. And yes, there's kind of you can see the previous versions of like a trigger, for example. You can see some of that kind of version control, but throughout the entire Zendesk instance, it's really hard to see what's happened before. And I don't know if any of you, the admins on here, have been documenting changes through spreadsheets or through Slack messages, through emails. It's just not sustainable. It's just not a way to to be able to see and track and kind of think, okay, on the 15th of March, 2023, the trigger was working on this day because it had this, this, and this. And then I've changed this and this. It's just a nightmare. So that is kind of, I guess that kind of links all four of them together, really. But it could be anything, macros.
Yeah, I mean, just on that point, I mean, version control, like that was not invented by Sato, right? That's a principle that has been around for many years for a very good reason, right? Exactly what you said. Like nobody has the capacity to remember what changed when and by whom. And that's the essence of version control. Every change is written down, no matter what. Usually it's unmutable, right? Um, yeah,
Those,
it's
it's
just there. That's what it does, that's what it was made for. So you change a macro forever and ever, it's going to be written in GitHub or GitLab or Bitbucket or Azure DevOps, doesn't matter which flavor you like. And then it's going to be there forever and ever. And if you want to go back, you can always restore. And if you just want to take a look or ask the question of who touched this trigger from the dawn of time when we just set up our Zendesk instance, we can also tell you that in a fairly quickly amount of time, like short amount of time. Sorry.
For sure. It's probably worth mentioning, I should have maybe said this when I introduced myself, that I started from, I guess within the Zendesk squad, I started as a customer service agent. I kind of built myself up with all the different tools that there were and learning from all the kind of different admins and experts. But because I don't have a developer background, I'm not necessarily the most technical person. I often need version control or any kind of documentation to see how things were working or see how things might have worked or look at any past campaigns, maybe some automations that were successful back in the day or something. So I need version control. I need this documentation to improve and to better myself, and that has kind of allowed me to grow uh, into this administrative role that I kind of perform when I work.
Mhm. Okay. And then maybe just another quick comment there on the it's hard to maintain, like growth makes it harder to maintain stability. When you have a team of, maybe one admin or two admins, things are fine, and you have the confidence to say, like, we know our system, this guy and myself, we built everything, we know all the macros, right? But when you have a team of 25 people, and some of them joined a week ago, but some of them been working there for 5 years, it varies,
Yeah,
right? And you don't have that confidence. And if you do, let's be honest, you're kind of lying to yourself at that point. So, or
sure.
maybe it's false positive. You shouldn't have that confidence, right?
Of course, and I know it's kind of like it is the job of a Zendesk admin to be able to answer these questions, but sometimes it feels like who died and made me king? Like why I don't know the answer to this. Like you're asking me what will happen if we delete this trigger or if we change this tag. And it's yeah, I can guess blindly and I can go in and I can kind of try and work it out. But if you're a huge organization with thousands of macros and lots of triggers and lots of automations, it's sometimes even the most clued up admin won't be able to answer those questions without a tool to help you.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. So another point to consider, and they say that it's always good to start small and grow as you go. So even if you don't have a team of 25, if you use the best in business practices and tools, it will for definitely be easier when you become that, bigger team with more people. Um, okay, but
And
let's move on.
it's
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say it really is even the growth. I think I'm thinking back to a company that I worked for before, and it's the growth is kind of even with one other Zendesk admin, you still need something to manage your Zendesk environment because it's still you still receive questions of I think I want to make this change, but I'm not sure what happens. Or I think I'm scared to do this because I think that's probably the best phrase to sum it up. I'm scared to do this because
Yeah. And also, what's on the other end? Like, if I don't get this right, what's the consequence?
totally. And like you said, a developer would never probably doesn't really go with the I'm scared to do this because approach because they have all the QA and the testing and their
Yeah.
sandboxing and there's just everything. And so when it comes to Zendesk, why are we like this? Why do we just kind of close our eyes, press go, and hope for the best? It's
Exactly,
not
exactly. That's
always great.
exactly our topic today. You said it exactly as I did, as I imagined it. So thank you for that sentence. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. So how does configuration chaos creeps in? So without kind of going bullet by bullet, let's just talk about this in general, right? Like you just don't know what you don't know, right? So nobody knows what the other person is doing. Like if I'm building a new macro, if Jake is not in macros, he's not going to know that I create a macro. And even if he is, he might not even notice. So there's lack of visibility. You don't know what other people are doing. And then there's also some limitations within Zendesk, right? There is no version control baked into Zendesk. There is no dependencies to let you know, oh, if you delete this macro, it's going to touch these fields. It's not built into the system. And if something goes wrong, you don't have the option of rolling back because you just created something. So the rolling back is going in the UI and clicking backwards and just hoping for the best, right? Um, and then lack of documentation. So that has two faults, right? Documentation from one perspective would be to just document the changes, like who made the change, what was the actual impact of the change, and what changed, and all the nitty-gritty pieces. And then there's the compliance part of things, right? Some companies require you because of, being a public company, or just because they're very strict about who touches their Zendesk instance, they need everything well documented, right? And right now within Zendesk, if you don't have Salto, there is no option to do that. So that's another one that, pretty often comes up.
Well,
And then,
just
yeah, go ahead.
just to give their desk, because I know I'm probably thinking somebody, product member is watching this thinking, well, actually, you can do this, you can do that. We're not talking about the giant audit log of everything that's ever happened within Zendesk because that is just messy and not very well organized. So there's hacky ways to do things. But why do you need to hack? We shouldn't have to hack. We should find ways, native ways, like it says on the screen, to be able to do these things.
Yeah, and with all honesty, when Zendesk created the audit log, that was not the purpose,
For sure.
right? The audit log is there for, you to say, oh, somebody deleted a trigger. Who was that? Right? Then we go back and say, it was Jake. All right, you're in trouble, right? But that the purpose is not to say, oh, Jake deleted a trigger, so that means that he worked on ticket 5, 6, 7, 8. No, no. If you're working on tickets 5, 6, 7, 8, you should have version control, which has a commit or a pull request that contains the information of exactly what Jake was working on, the things that he did in sandbox, and how that eventually got to production after testing and so forth. So just to give you some context. Yeah. So, and then the first one is temporary workarounds become permanent, and yeah, it's a great sentence. It's just very true. You know, you start touching things in production, and the next thing you know, you don't even notice when the service is down. You're like, at that point, you're basically, I don't know, is it transparent? You don't really care about it, or maybe you're not worried about it as much, or maybe you even haven't noticed that you broke something, right? All of these become second nature. You're doing something you shouldn't. And as we said, every person here, no matter what company you're working for, if you go to the VP R&D, or whoever runs R&D, CTO, and say, hey, I want to change something in production, the answer would be an immediate no. So why treat Zendesk differently, right? That's kind of what we're talking about here. All right, with that, I'm gonna move on to the next one. So what is it that we're paying because we don't follow those best practices? So we're wasting time, right? Hours spent on troubleshooting, on understanding who's doing what and what got changed and who made that change and why. So there's a lot of reverse engineering that comes into play, right? So if Jake, worked in an organized change management process where he started from a ticket that came from the business with a very clear requirement, and then he used the sandbox and he created a trigger and he wrote everything down and he used Git with version control to deploy, and then he got it to production. When I come in the next week and I'm like, okay, show me that ticket, I have all the information laid out in front of me, right? I don't have to ask questions. It's all there. But if I take the manual route, business, let's assume that the first piece is the same requirement from the business with the ticket. I want to assume that's the case for most companies, but that's not always the case. But let's assume that it is in this example. He would go ahead, make the change, and a week after, if I come in and I want to know what happened, unless he wrote a comment and put a nice picture and was really like generous to, document whatever he did, I have no idea. I have zero idea of what actually changed. So that's a waste of time. And then I'm going to go back and start, reverse engineering. I'm going to open the macro. I'm going to look at the macro. I'm going to read, all the conditions. I'm going to go, oh, okay, that group goes to Zen. Okay, now I get it, right? That's time. Time equals money. Money, we all want more, right? And we want to spend as little as possible for our company, right? That's the essence of a company, right? So just think about that for a second. Now multiply that by not just one person, but maybe 20 people, right? Monthly and annually and across 5 years and 10 years, and it's a big chunk. We're talking big money here that's wasted for no good reason. So that's kind of the first bullet, time wasted. And we didn't even talk about the rolling back, right? So if the worst happened and now we have to go back, it's another layer on top. And then operational inefficiencies. So maybe I'll let Jake take that one, just if you wanna kind of explain that from your perspective.
Yeah, totally. So, just when things are not working the way they should do because of the panicked environment that you're working in, because you're trying to fix something so quickly or so without due process, that it can really affect your business. Let's say it's a simple trigger that kind of, okay, after 4 days of pending, we send another reminder to the customer asking them to respond if they need any help, saying, "Hey, it's been 4 days, we haven't heard from you. How can we still help?" And then maybe the day after that, that ticket solves, and we say, "We haven't heard from you. But it's X amount of days. It's time to come back again if we need help, whatever." If somewhere down the line you've made a change to that trigger and the ticket never moves from pending to the reminder never goes out again, it just stays pending forever, you can kind of see the chain of events of what happened. The customer might open another ticket, and they've now got 3 or 4 different agents dealing with one customer on 4 different channels. You can have a negative impact on your kind of your CSAT scores, or any Trustpilot reviews maybe, or any kind of public reviews. You can really see the chain of events of what happens just by a broken workflow. And as we've said, it wastes time for the managers and for the admins trying to fix everything. It wastes time for the customer, which is something you should never want to do, because what customer wants to come back chasing 4 or 5 times that something isn't working?
Yeah, and just on that point, two things that I really like that you said. First one is um, the implications on the brand, on the business, right? These days, like if you go out and get like really bad service, you write a Google review, you're gonna put this, somewhere on the internet, you might tweet about it, you might do an Instagram post, and you never know the implications, right? It might go viral and then your company goes bankrupt. Like these things happen, it's real, right? And it all started from a trigger or a macro not working. What's the big fuss, right? But the implications might be huge because I am a very important person. I'm a celebrity. I'm a whatever, right? And I'm coming into chat to talk to this brand, and suddenly I need to open 5 chats, and I'm not interested in opening 5 chats. And I'm going to tell my audience how horrible this service is. And look at I don't want to talk rudely, but look at the storm that we've created for nothing, right? So just think about that for a second. That's just one example that you brought up, which I really connect with. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, this is exactly what we're talking about. Like you never know how these things are going to evolve and kind of turn up, even though you were just trying to do your best and you didn't have any. I'm sure that the admin, who causes these chain of events never came in and said, "Oh, I'm going to break Zendesk. I'm going to destroy that trigger." That was never the intent, right? But because they are working in a very manual way with zero redundancy that doesn't allow them to fall back to anything, and there is no change management process, these things happen, right?
And we spoke about the kind of the impact of the customer and the impact on the agents and kind of senior management, but we also haven't spoken about our frontline agents, who are kind of the defenders of your company or the troubleshooters. And if they're struggling because automation didn't work the way it should do, or another business rule wasn't kind of running as it should, it's just increased frustration for them, like burnout, as it says on the screen. And they could be spending their time, I guess, more efficiently and better by kind of putting all their focus into really delivering expert customer service, but instead they're kind of falling down the rabbit hole of, oh gosh, why is this trigger not working? All these chats are coming in, all these messages are coming in. This used to run this way, but I don't have time to message anyone about it because I'm too busy taking all these messages, and it you can see how it can spiral. And I think anyone who's worked in the field knows just how things can spiral, especially if you don't have uh,
Yeah,
configuration
so fun fact, I don't know if I ever told you this, Jake, but I used to be an agent a long time ago. And I know exactly what you're talking about, right? When something goes wrong and suddenly you're bombarded with a huge amount of chats, coming in from all the different, channels, and you're just trying to control the fire. And the system that you use to provide the service is basically not helping you. It's making it worse, right?
management. Absolutely. And
That's so I can really relate with what you just said. So
yeah, and then selfishly, from an admin point of view, like there's only so many 11 p.m. on a Saturday night phone calls you can receive as well, saying, why is this not working?
100%. Yeah, we all want our, private time.
Sure.
If we're more redundant and if we have more better process, we won't get into those situations, and we can respect our private time. So I'm also with you on that part. All right, let's move on. But thank you. These are great examples and a really good conversation. I think we already talked about the business risk from kind of what you brought up and then me chiming in. So I don't think we have to repeat these things, but customer satisfaction, customer churn, agents not being happy, yeah, and then eventually revenue impact, right? That's the end game if it doesn't work out. So,
It's something that can be avoidable.
yes, exactly, 100%. If you work the right way, you can get this to, I don't want to say zero, but very, very close to zero, almost zero. Like, I don't want to promise a zero. I think it's like a little bit ambitious, but you can narrow it down to something very, very small. And yeah, worst case. And then it's not all like you might break a macro or trigger even if you have salt, right? The thing is, you have the ability to respond quickly. And you're not going to start asking questions. You just click a button and you're back to square one, right?
It's still my favorite feature. That was
Yeah,
that's the
no.
one I use all the time.
Yeah, and we didn't always have that feature, so yeah, but anyhow, let's move on. So the next slide is talking a little bit about the implications of downtime. And again, I feel like we already talked about it. Maybe I'll just say a few words about GDPR and SOC 2 violations. That's an interesting one. And then legal penalties for missing SLAs. So I don't know how good Zendesk, well, Zendesk has SLAs, but I also know there's like other third parties that a lot of companies use to manage SLAs. There's one in mind without being too specific, or this is not a commercial. Um, but you know what I'm talking about, Jake, right? And I'm guessing the audience also has an idea. Write in chat if you know what I'm talking about. And in general, you're welcome to ask questions or write your opinions. We would love to, keep this open and engaged. So don't be shy. But SLAs and GDPR and SOC 2, That's a big thing these days, right? Customers that have, the right to be forgotten. For those of you that don't know, under GDPR, and like if I am a customer of a certain company and it has a bunch of information, but I don't want them to keep that information, usually I'd go on chat and say, hey guys, you're very nice, but please remove everything you have about me. And they're obligated to do that, right? Um, so with having a better change management control, with having, more visibility, with having all of these things in motion, it would be much easier for a company to say, okay, here's a ticket. Let's get rid of all these things, or we're using that third party and we have those macros which are touching those customers, and that's not compliant with the process or the structure. So let's just get rid of that. So all of these things become more simple. So that's one angle. And then SOC 2 is more of a security posture, a compliance posture. It's kind of more about like how you are working as a company. It's kind of I think I'm no expert on these things. I mean, I deal with them pretty often, but I think it's a requirement in SOC 2 to have every change request documented. I'm almost 100% sure of that. And assuming that's the case, if you don't have a third-party tool like Salto, it's pretty much impossible, and you're probably chasing your own tail. You're trying, you have maybe, as we talked about, a spreadsheet, Google Doc. I've seen all kinds of weird things that customers are using, but eventually you don't have something that's robust and you know, accepted in the industry by companies. A lot of companies have to go through an audit annually for SOC 2 for compliance. So whether it be well, we don't need to mention the name, but all the big four accounting firms that usually do these things, they're very picky, and if they see that it's based on version control, it's immediately a thumbs up, right? It shows that you're a serious company, that you're doing it the right way, that you treat your business applications the way you treat code, which is the way you should. So yeah, that's just to give you a little bit of an idea about that. Um, Yeah, you could lose revenue. Yeah, if your Zendesk instance is, unstable, you might lose revenue. Yeah, because we don't just do support, we also do sales, right? And if the macro broke the sales queue, then you are bleeding money. And yeah, that's probably the worst thing that could happen to a business, especially an online business. So even if you just have one admin and he got it wrong once, you might be losing, but it happened on Black Friday and you sell some sort of merchandise, whatever, that is very popular in Black Friday. Actually, without using names, I have this pretty nice example of another company I used to work for ages ago. And we had this customer. Is this a good story? Is this a good story time, Jake? Am
I
I
think so. I'm intrigued. I was blown away by
Well,
your
okay, if I got
client.
your attention, I'll just keep going. Um, so this company they paid a lot of money. It's an American company. It's a very big company, privately owned, and they paid a huge amount of money for a Super Bowl ad, right? And right after the Super Bowl ad was aired, their chat stopped working, right? So think about that. They paid millions of dollars. They hired professionals. They did a whole commercial. Everything was set up, goes live, and now the customers are, punching in on a keyboard, going into their website. They want to talk to a rep, and boom, it's down, right? Why? Because nobody gave it enough, consideration and thought. Could have it been avoided? Absolutely, right? If you had good change management process, if you had version control, if you were working the right way, you would probably be able to avoid that. What are the consequences? Loss of revenue. What is the implications to that, vendor or that person who made the mistake? They might lose their job, or if it's a company, maybe it was through a third party that was giving service to that company, they might lose the contract, right? So or they might need to pay a penalty. It really depends. In that specific example, I'll just say that we paid a huge penalty, a lot of money, right? Um, yeah, so these are things to consider. This is a real example, and it was more than a decade ago. It wasn't yesterday. But back then you didn't have Salto. Now you do. So lucky you. Um, yeah. So just a fun example. All right, let's keep moving here. So what does stability look like? So let's talk a little bit about the positive. So you can see our friend there, Knuckles. For those of you that don't know him, he's the coolest beaver in town. Yeah, version control, right? So in Salto, if it wasn't clear up until this point, we integrate with version control, best in breed, GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, Azure DevOps, on-prem, cloud, we can do all. So you just pick your flavor and you're good. Um, Clear documentation and impact analysis. So you don't have to be afraid, as Jake said. Don't be afraid. Just go ahead and search up the macro, see the dependencies, understand what's going to happen, go and make a well-documented change with Git, do the change, you're done. Happy days, right? No need to worry. Yeah, so that's another one. Ability to test changes before they go live. So that's a great one. With all honesty, that's not just a Salto thing, that's in general, right? You have a sandbox, you're paying money for that sandbox in many cases. Use it, right? It's there for a reason. Use the sandbox, create things in sandbox, test them thoroughly, and then deploy to production. Whenever I say that, usually, and Jake, you'll probably you probably heard this sentence before. It's just a field, I create my fields in production. What's the big fuss, right? Well, one field in the wrong place can cause the chain of events that we've talked about more than once in this webinar.
Yeah, the
Uh,
butterfly effect. But also
yeah,
when it's not just the field, when it is, I don't know, a very, very detailed business flow or business rule, and you've got your sandbox on one side of your screen and your production on the other side of the screen, you really are just manually copying from one screen to the other to the other to the other. It's all eating into the cost, like we said, time management, everything. It's just it can be frustrating. It can be really frustrating to not
yeah,
have something to ease that experience.
yeah. And by the way, just a question here, Jake. I'm not sure what the answer is going to be. Have you ever used Salto for Zendesk Guide?
I have.
Okay.
I have for my favorite one of my favorite features. Um, First of all, finding any mention of words and or phrases or links or whatever, they kind of dead links, it's really useful. But finding and replacing. So anytime that we've needed to kind of do mass update or something, say we've just decided that one word has changed or it's a different spelling or maybe it's capitalized in the middle of the sentence or something, whatever it could be, it's that's when I've used Salto for guide for a find and replace feature where I can just a few steps and then roll that out and it will change everything in
Okay.
production.
Actually, that wasn't my angle, but thank you. And also, I'd say maybe you change the language, right, in the company. Maybe, you used to use a certain term and now you use a different term, so you want to make sure you change that across, right? So that's the example that you gave, and that's a great example. I was actually referring to the backup and restore side of things, right? So a lot of companies use Guide for their customer-facing documentation, right? And it could be pretty complex. Maybe they have multiple brands, maybe they have themes on top, right? It's very tailored, it's very specific. And then, the next thing you know, somebody goes in and he doesn't really know the difference. He doesn't understand the difference between the support piece and the guide piece, and he's in the wrong admin UI. Have you ever seen one of those happen? Right? They're very similar. So,
Totally.
right? And before you know it, you've deleted like a brand. And now you're in a world of pain, right? How do you get that back?
More than
Um,
pain, you're probably fired at this
you're
point.
probably done at that point.
Yes.
Assuming you're not, or maybe you want to, clean up before anybody notices. Um, what do you actually do? There is no solution in the system. Like Zendesk, it has nothing for that use case. But if you have Salto, you're don't worry. All you need to do is kind of restore. Um, I do want to maybe show a little bit of the restore capability. I don't think a lot of people have seen that piece in Salto, so maybe we'll do a quick 20-second, maybe 2 minutes demo.
Definitely.
Let me just quickly kind of jump in. Yeah, so let me just share. So I'm still sharing the right screen. Let's just go here. Yeah, so this is Salto for those of you that don't know. And then I'll just look at my Zendesk production instance. So all the restores, everything that has to do with restore happens in this screen. It's called changelog. And basically each line here represents a operation, either a fetch or a deployment that happened in Salto that had changes, right? So if something happened, but there were no changes, we're not going to keep it. It's not interesting. But if something changed, we create a new line and we say, okay, we had a full fetch yesterday. 8 elements were changed in Zendesk. And then we kind of specify. And it was initiated by a scheduled fetch. So for those of you that don't know, you can run a manual fetch or you have a scheduled fetch that runs once a day, once an hour, once a week, depending on the cadence that you choose. And it was changed by, in this case, Salto Dev, but if it was a real person, not my demo account, you'd probably have a name there. And the commit, right? So we actually take all those changes and we also put them in Git because we always want to make sure that Git is aligned with the service, right? It contains the latest and greatest. Jake, am I doing justice to the explanation? Keep me honest here.
Absolutely. It's
Okay.
making me nervous watching it because I've been in this situation where I have had to be on this page and I've had to do something like this.
Yeah. And by the way, you can also filter. So if you're looking for a specific deployment, it will be here. You can just search for the ticket number or the name of the deployment. And you can also add some filters. So if you're like, okay, like I don't care about everything. I only want to see the full fetches, or I only want to see the deployments, or I only want to see a specific time frame. The green ones have those are days in which we had changes, right? The gray ones, nothing changed. Um, you can also do that from there. And then, yeah, let's assume that, I want to go back to this point in time, February 27th, and I want to restore. So when I click on restore, Salto is going to basically take that, snapshot that we have from February 27th at 5 and 10 minutes PM, and it's going to compare that with the latest fetch, right? Now, when we do a compare in Salto, we take all of the changes between these 2 points in time, and we show only the things that are different, right? So the things that are the same are not going to be even visible in our compare in a minute. Only things that are different are going to be here. And voila, we have 9 differences from, again, this is my not so very active, sandbox environment. But if this was Jake's environment, probably have, hundreds, maybe thousands, who knows, right? So there's 9 differences again between Feb 27 and 40 minutes ago, right? And these are the actual changes. Now, if I want to go back in time and be exactly as I was on February 27, I can just pick everything and just preview and deploy, and I'm done. I'm completely as I was in that point in time. If I want to be more picky, I can just pick, a specific. Like I only want to bring back my triggers. Okay, let's pick the triggers, right? And the same principle of Salto still applies. So when I pick a trigger, if that trigger has a required dependency, obviously Salto will tell me, hey, Dan, like it's great that you want to roll back that trigger, but you have to take those ticket fields and that ticket field custom field options with you as well. Otherwise, it's not going to work, right? So the principles are the same. In this example, we have a few more dependencies, and now Salto is happy, right? So we took those nested dependencies. So when you think about that for a second, if you take a trigger that depends on a field, but that field depends on ticket field options, it's going to trickle down, right? So Salto is recursive, and it's going to make sure that you take the whole thing. And that's it. The next step is just a preview. For those of you that don't know, a deployment has 3 steps. There is the element selection where you pick your things, preview where you kind of see what's going to happen, and we kind of tell you if it's going to work or not. And if it's going to fail, we try to tell you why, because maybe you're trying to do something which is not allowed by the Zendesk API, or maybe something else. We've seen this problem before. Maybe it's a Zendesk limitation. There's a variety of reasons. And then you actually deploy, and you get to the summary screen that kind of shows you the result. So quickly, just to explain the concept of how you would use Salto to restore. Maybe last sentence on that piece, and then we're going to start wrapping up here. You can also have this in your Git repo, right? Whether it's cloud, on-prem, again, any provider, you'll have that backup in your repo as well. So if you just want to go into that repo and grab a NACL file of a trigger or a macro or a field or whatever, and you want to take not the latest version, but the commit that happened, I don't know, a year ago, which had a different structure, you can also take that, go into Salto, deploy, and you're back to square one, right? So that's also an option. This is more of a convenient way of doing it from the UI. Jake, I see you want to say something, so go
Yeah,
ahead.
I was just gonna say I've had to do both. So before the Salted button was created, and we kind of knew that there was this like secret way of being able to do it with it through Bitbucket or something else. And I have to say, I much prefer the new and improved Salto restore button, because it's just well, just look, it can really be done in seconds. And the whole dependencies, and it's just the more granular you are with your fetches as well, if you have it done on the hour or whatever you're doing, or every time you make a change, if you're just fetching it, it's we were talking about getting it down to zero or zero risk. You really can get to as zero as possible, which I think is really why it's such a useful tool, because yes, the risk is still there, but then the final fail-safe is that you can actually just control Z, which you can't do on Zendesk.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so just wanted to show that piece. Honestly, this was not planned at all, and as you already noticed, this is kind of us having a casual conversation. We're just talking about things from our experience. All right, I'm gonna leave a few minutes for the audience because I do want to see some questions. Hopefully, we haven't been talking to avoid. Hopefully, you've been listening and you have something you want to express. So this is your chance. Yeah, so go ahead if you want to write in chat. You're welcomed. Eva, I see you're here twice, so maybe you have 2 questions.
Or just two separate screens, one to look at me and one to look at you.
Yeah, could be the reason. Or Vanessa, Mac, Caitlin, and we have Jay, which is he has a pretty long name there. Leora, I think we can wrap up. This was super fun. Yeah, we can wrap up, but let's give the audience another minute. And if they don't ask anything, we'll say goodnight.
Feel free to drop a message on LinkedIn or anything as well, and I'll be happy
Oh,
to.
Vanessa, there you go. Okay, thank you. You don't have any questions? Anything that comes to mind? Feel free. This is your time. No, all good. Okay, super. Appreciate it. Thanks for the webinar. It was great. Thank you, Mac, for joining us. It was great having you.
Oh, I do see
Receive a
a.
recording. Leora, will they receive a recording? I don't know. Yes, with multiple S's. Yes. So yes, Mac, you will receive a recording. Sorry, Caitlin, you will receive a recording. I would like to share with my other admins. Yes, great webinar, guys. No questions for now. Thank you. Our pleasure. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was great having you, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me and Jake mumble. Um, if you got something out of that, that's just great. So thank you. Yeah, with that, I'm gonna say thank you so much, Jake, for taking the time and joining. It was a pleasure talking to you as always. Hopefully, I'll see you in Tel Aviv or in London, and I'll give you a Sato plushie, although you probably have a couple of.
I want more socks. That's what I
Oh, you
want.
want more? Did you get the limited editions one?
I do have the limited edition. What the yellow ones?
Yeah, yeah. No, the teal ones. There's like a.
I do have the teal ones. Yes, I do.
Okay, those are really nice though. Anyway, yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jake. Have a good one, and we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.